Good morning, welcome to Catex TV. My name is Frank Fortunato. Today is Monday, December 22nd, 2014. If you want to follow us on Twitter, go to Catex TV. In New York over the weekend, two patrolmen, members of the New York City Police Department, were sitting in a police car in the Bedford-Stuyvesant section of Brooklyn, and they were assassinated in cold blood by an individual claiming to have done it for the two gentlemen who were killed by police and not indicted, not resulting in any indictment of any of the policemen involved. The man then ran into a subway station and killed himself when he was being cornered by police. Police all over the country now are on high alert for so-called revenge shootings that may occur. The Times of London reported yesterday in its Sunday business section that the Lloyd's of London insurer Catlin is reported to have agreed to the £2.5 billion takeover bid from U.S. rival XL. You'll recall that Catlin revealed on Wednesday it had been approached by XL with an offer which would really have been about a 20% premium to Catlin's current share price. Catlin's share price has surged about 15% since the news of the deal broke, so it would be a 5% premium now. Catlin was founded by its CEO, Stephen Catlin, 30 years ago, and has since grown into an international business employing 2,400 staff, writing gross written premiums of about 5.3 billion US a year. It has 6 big hubs: London, Bermuda, the US, Asia Pacific, Europe, and Canada. A takeover of Catlin would cause the Catlin and XL group to be a world leader in specialty and property catastrophe markets and a top 10 player in the global reinsurance market. Over the weekend, it seemed to be a little bit of a seesaw. At one point, it looked as if Sony was not going to release the contested movie, The Interview, which is probably a horrible movie, but it seems to have been generating an awful lot of free publicity thanks to Kim Jong-un. But yesterday, David Boies, an attorney for Sony, said on national TV that Sony only delayed the release of the film. He was speaking of the company's decision to cancel the Christmas Day release by pulling the movie from theaters. This followed a threat that anybody who was watching the movie in the theater risked suffering a, quote, bitter fate. This threat came from a group called the Guardians of Peace, which is nominally, supposedly associated with North Korea, although North Korea claims not to know anything about it. Sony said over the weekend that, in fact, no decisions have been made. The company is still exploring options for distribution. In a CNN interview, Sony CEO President Michael Linton said the studio had not given in to pressure from hackers and was still considering ways to distribute the movie. Over the weekend, President Obama was interviewed, and he said that he had wished Sony had contacted him before deciding to pull the movie. He would have picked the phone up and called the theater owners, the big chains that had been expressing some misgivings, and urged them to show the movie. Meanwhile, North Korea has said that any American punishment over the hacking attack would lead to damage, quote, thousands of times greater, with targets including the White House and the Pentagon. President Obama, in that same interview, indicated he was considering putting North Korea back on the terrorist state sponsor of terrorism list, which would mean even more economic sanctions on North Korea, which is something that the North is not particularly interested in having happen. Meanwhile, yesterday, Saudi Arabia, the world's top petroleum exporter, said that it would not cut output to prop up oil markets, even if nations outside OPEC did so. This is the strongest signal that it has yet sent that it does plan to ride out the market's biggest slump in years. Saudi Arabia's oil minister said, if other countries want to cut production, they're welcome. We're not going to cut. Certainly, Saudi Arabia is not going to cut. He said we're not 100% pleased with prices, but they would improve, but he didn't know when. His remarks at a conference in Abu Dhabi were the second time in 3 days that Saudi Arabia has signaled it would not change output levels, preferring to allow the market to stabilize on its own. The oil minister of Kuwait concurred with him, saying they will not cut production. And after the OPEC meeting, OPEC maintained its target output of 30 million barrels a day, leaving the market to balance itself without the group's intervention. Boy, have we come a long way. Isn't that something? The National Hurricane Center has upgraded Tropical Storm Faye to a hurricane when it hit Bermuda back in October. In Faye's case, the data showed that the storm did reach hurricane strength with winds of 74 miles per hour as it hit the island. It was a short-lived storm, but it was the first of 2 hurricanes to make landfall in Bermuda that week. It was followed by Hurricane Gonzalo just 4 days later with 110 mile per hour winds. The U.S. Geological Survey has detected yet another seismic event in the cluster zone of earthquakes that began Saturday afternoon in British Columbia in Western Canada. The latest quake struck last night at 10:51 p.m. local time. It had a magnitude of 4.3, and it was just kilometers from the other 5 earthquakes that began on Saturday. The site of the cluster is about 90 miles southwest of Bella Bella, northwest of Vancouver Island, right where the Juan de Fuca plate begins to meet the North American tectonic plate. The last 5 quakes are believed to be aftershocks to the first quake that occurred Saturday afternoon. That was a 4.3. The other aftershocks were 5.1, and then 4.0, 4.5, and 4.9. So there was a lot of rattling around up in British Columbia yesterday. Officials with the Tampa Fire Rescue Department say 7 people have been taken to the hospital with injuries after a lightning strike in a parking lot outside of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers football stadium after a National Football League game. The game between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Green Bay Packers was just wrapping up when lightning apparently struck an SUV in the parking lot, kicking up rocks and gravel and knocking a number of people down. The injuries don't appear to be serious. Lightning strikes in Tampa are fairly rare in the winter. Fortunately, it did not strike the stadium where some 60,000 people were sitting. That's the news for today. If we have any breaking news, we'll come back and tell you. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow.